All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Ethical Outlook, Legal Issues and Trends in the Counseling Profession, which is hosted by the American Rehab Counseling Association, also known as ARCA. So this webinar is part of ARCA's ongoing webinar series to provide disability-focused education and highlight the important and meaningful work of disability advocates all across the globe. My name's Allie, and I have the pleasure of hosting today's webinar. And just before we begin, I'd like to inform you, our audience, that if you have the ability to ask questions by typing them in the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to type your questions as they come up, and our wonderful presenter will either read them or I'll collect them at the end. And during the last 10 or 15 minutes, we can have a little Q&A discussion. For our members who will be requesting the continuing education credits, please make sure to sign in via the form in the chat box and make sure to complete the evaluation, which will be provided at the end. So at this time, I'd like to present our guest speaker, Dr. Aprille Woodson, JD LPC NCC, a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia, and the program manager of ethics for the ACA. In her current position at the ACA, she is the subject matter expert for ethics and oversees the program portfolio and initiatives that lead to the development of all ethics-related programs, including managing the ethics adjudication process due to violations of professional standards. She also works with efforts to expand the counseling compact, woohoo, and other practice-related issues. Dr. Woodson has experience working with programmatic initiatives in criminal justice and juvenile justice, community-based counseling, consulting on crisis intervention development with the criminal justice system, and a long history of child advocacy and protection with the Georgia Development of Family and Children's Services and the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice. Dr. Woodson, we are honored to have you here today, and at this point, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Allie, for introducing me, and I'm excited to be here. And I'll just add one caveat. I like to interact with the audience, so I'm going to ask some questions along the way, maybe one, two, or three. And I want you to feel comfortable enough to just, come off mute and just engage. And I'm looking for everybody's engagement as much as possible. If you don't feel comfortable coming off and speaking, feel free to put your questions or comments even in the chat. I probably won't be able to see the comments, but there will probably be someone here I think Christine's gonna maybe read them for me, and then we can discuss that way as well. So get ready because I'm about to ask you a question in a minute. So we'll get started. So we'll review ethical decision making today. I want to do just a little bit on that. I'm not going to go over each and every slide simply because I have too many slides. I've expressed that. I've got about 66, but I'm going to skip over some key things. I'm going to talk about some key things and skip over some things that may not be so important, but we can still talk about them in the context of our discussion. We'll talk about the latest ethical trends that are going on in the profession. We're going to talk about the compact. I'll tell you about that, how we got started, what you need to know right now, and how you can proceed if you'd like to. And you become familiar with some of the changes that are happening with the Code of Ethics. Right now, ACA is in the process of updating the Code of Ethics. I am working with the task force on that. And so I can tell you some of the things that they're thinking, some of the areas that we are updating, some of the things that are going to be new that's going to be a part of the code that we can update more frequently. So I want to take a moment to just talk about professional values and decision making. And I just want to say we are in a state right now within this country where so many things are in flux, so many things are changing. And so we have to be aware of our core values as counselors and understand what we need to be doing along the way when it comes to professional values and decision making. And so we still have the premise and the basis of autonomy, making sure that we respect our clients in their decision-making process, beneficence and non-malfeasance, and then looking at justice, fidelity, and veracity. These are all important areas within the profession that are lay a foundation of moving forward and making decisions. So sometimes values may conflict in some scenarios. And this is where it's important to engage a decision-making model, some structure that you may use that help you move forward in navigating issues that when they arise. So counseling ethics rest on these values, and it's important that we understand how to navigate that as we move forward. So models guide resolutions. As we're talking about ethical decision making, it's important to understand those steps when we're going through that. So identify, consult, act, and evaluate. And so ACA and CRCC stress documentation of our process, balancing confidentiality versus duty to warn in some cases. And I'm going to give you an example of that case in just a moment. Both the ACA and CRCC codes of ethics emphasize the importance of clear documentation when ethical decisions are made. Ethical practice includes consultation, either with supervisors, colleagues, legal counsel, considering cultural implications and state laws, and revisiting the decision afterward to reflect on the effectiveness of it. And I'm saying this is because we're navigating a time right now in society in which this is more important now than ever. So many things are happening within the country, whether it's immigration issues or working with clients with special needs or clients that may have issues that involve maybe reproductive rights or the LGBTQ population. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice for a second. But even with all of this happening, we have to remember, how do we navigate this ethically and what do we need to do? So we use different models, but we want to, and these are just some examples of models that can be used. Recognizing the problem, collaborating again with your client to define the problem, developing solutions with the client, choosing a solution, reviewing the process with the client and re-choose, implementing and evaluating with the client, and again, continuing with the reflection. So I have an example here, and I want you guys, this is our duty to warn, and this is where I want you to engage with me. So I'm going to give you a scenario, I'm going to give you a 2-minute clock, and then I want to get your feedback on that. So here's a case, confidentiality versus duty to warn. A counselor is working with a college student who reveals during a session that they sometimes fantasize about harming their ex-partner, but insists they would never actually do. They express they were overwhelmed by their partner's debilitating health, and they don't think they can continue to be supportive. So the ethical dilemma here is confidentiality versus duty and protection. Uh, so both the ACA and CRCC codes of ethics emphasize the importance of clear documentation when ethical decisions are made. So all of the things that you talk about, you want to still document certain things, especially if it evolves into something later. Ethical practice includes, again, that consultation piece that we identified, but also understanding what are your state laws? What do they require? And what are your expectations when it comes to that within the profession? So here are some following an ethical decision-making model. I'm not going to, read through all of this, but just remember, identifying the problem is going to be really important. Applying your professional code of ethics, whether it's ACA, CRCC, or both, understanding what that means in this process. Explore relevant literature, resources, and consult. And that's going to be important. Reviewing your state law again. And I want to underscore that because some counselors or they have some conflicting issues where the profession says one thing and the law says something different. And examining a professional resource or assessing for risk, someone said that earlier, generate potential courses of action, and understanding what those are. When it comes to confidentiality and different, whether you break it or you maintain it, when it comes to warning a potential victim or reaching out to the police, and consider potential consequences, as you move forward with navigating this and thinking on it, and evaluating selective courses of action as well as implementing and document. And I cannot say enough about documentation. Document, because that's one of the things we see that counselors get into trouble with. Failure to properly document or documenting the wrong information, things like that. So it's important to examine it from that perspective. Any comments before I move on to the code of ethics? Any comments, any things critical that you want to add in, or any questions at this point? All right, we'll move on. So let's talk about the code of ethics and what's happening with the code. We are in the process at the American Counseling Association of updating the code. This process has been a two-phase process. It's being done differently than it has in the past. And some of these things will reflect what is actually happening within society right now, within the practice right now. Some of the changes are going to reflect that. The code is going to be made more concise, not longer. I think ACA has one of the longest codes out there. And so it's going to be made more concise. And we will be adding guidelines for areas that can often change or frequently change. And this is where we can update these guidelines more frequently versus the 10-year updates for the Code of Ethics. And content from different sections of the code may be moved around because there's some duplications within the code and they do apply, but we're going to make that clear and concise. So, some of the legal and ethical trends that we have going on right now is HIPSO has reported to us the number of malpractice claims among counselors have risen to 40%. Ethical violations regarding Section A, where the counseling relationship, continue to remain the most common area that continues to increase. And according to their information, sexual misconduct, failure to maintain professional standards, and breach of confidentiality are some of the areas that they see. And nearly 35 to 40% of all state boards matters are related to sexual misconduct, failure to maintain standards, and again, breach of confidentiality. And here is, you can see right here to the right, where you see some of the top areas that they deal with. Reporting to third parties, failure to practice within boundaries of competence, failure to accurately present qualifications or credentials, abandonment of the client, fraudulent billing, failure to observe parental and familial rights to make decisions on behalf of minor clients, and violation of professional boundaries, dual relationships that are non-sexual relationships in nature. And these complaints that were sexual or romantic in nature represented the top license matter as well as the top malpractice allegations against counselors. So I want to just pause for just a moment on that and just ask your input and thoughts about that when it comes to our profession of counseling. When you're working with or interacting with clients, how you see this, especially when you're working and you're adhering to the CRCC Code of Ethics. What are some of your concerns around this, and why is this continually happening? So, what I would say is it's important that you ensure that you are meeting all the HIPAA requirements for confidentiality, checking to see what your state requires, understanding and doing your continual education on understanding what is necessary to meet whether it be telehealth, using digital platforms, understanding what that is. And some counselors, and I will say, unfortunately, um, we look at they have gone into social media platforms to utilize that as a way of communication, facilitating processes with younger clients or just clients that feel very savvy with social media. That creates a whole another basket of problems and issues. And of course, the ACA Code of Ethics is going to address some of that. And I'll give you one of the just this is very simplistic, but this was an issue where a university was concerned about a student, a counseling student. I think I saw someone say C, counselor education, and this student was just a fabulous student. They did everything right. They were on top of their coursework, but they were also a social media influencer. And so I won't say what they posted on their social media page, but what I will say, it was unrelated, completely unrelated to the counseling profession. But there was concerns from the counseling department, and they really wanted to use this student as an example and really put this student out of school. And so she was an influencer, and so this was really her job. This was not even something she was doing just to have fun. She viewed this as her job. So how do we navigate even social media when we're working with clients? And then do our clients understand how to utilize technology, and our what are the expectations around that? So that's something important that we need to talk about even more as we're navigating through things. But here's some of the areas that are boundary crossings, and I won't go through them all, but some of the examples we see: accommodating a client when you're crossing boundaries with a convenient appointment time that you don't give anybody else, just this client, or taking on tasks beyond the job, such as transportation and delivering prescriptions, or sharing personal information such as your home address, or reducing fees, maybe just for this client only. And that can cross over when we get into boundaries and issues like this, connecting with clients on social media for non-clinical purposes or socializing with them. And I do understand, I'll put one caveat in there, and this is a very fine, thin caveat, that most of America's rural. And so you may be the only counselor in a particular area that's very small. And so you will run into your client. How do you handle that? How do you prepare your client? Letting your client know that you won't acknowledge them in public because you have that counselor client relationship, things like that. But how do you navigate that and understand how you can easily slip into a boundary crossing if you go too far with certain things? And so I'm seeing more and more of sexual misconduct, even within ACA, and some of the issues that we run into. But I don't want to stay on this point too long because I know time is of the essence. I was going to give you the 2 minute clock, but we're going to go on to other legal and ethical trends. You just mentioned technology, risk of confidentiality breaches. Informed consent is critical here. It's important that that is a continual thing that you are engaging with your clients, with people that you interact with professionally as a client counselor relationship. So understanding, giving them information, chatbot therapy. I see that listed in there. AI is the next one with emerging tools and privacy concerns. And there have been so many issues with AI chatbots going on that are providing advice and telling clients things to do when they're interacting with these chatbots, maybe even late at night. They're not interacting with the counselor. So we've got to be up on what's happening with artificial intelligence and being able to talk with our clients about it, especially if they feel like they need support. So if they need support, we need to give them other mechanisms other than AI and help them understand that this AI bot is not going to be a substitute for the professional training and experience that you have. So that's a critical process as we are walking through this, and especially with the Code of Ethics, as we are going to be creating an AI section that is going to be more like guidelines. Burnout and wellness, another area that we see that counselors have been getting into trouble with a little bit, and maintaining their competency. And the CRCC says ignorance of the law or code is not a defense. It's not a defense. So it's important for us to go to continuing educations, be familiar with our codes, engage in consultation. I know with ACA, we have ethics consultations for all of our members. So you can, at any point, at any time, schedule a consultation on whatever issue you have. Even students do it. And they do it sometimes with their homework. We don't do their homework, but we gently navigate and help them get in the right place. But it's important to understand what your code of ethics says that you can and cannot do, what you're required to do, and what those expectations entail as you are going through this process. Technology introduces cybersecurity risk, online boundary issues, and multi-jurisdiction concerns. So it is important that you understand what the state laws require, even with encryption standards. And so AI tools, understanding, we don't want to use AI to write our notes or conduct assessments or do any of those things because you have the thought process, the critical analysis of understanding and navigating that. But AI is here. Let's just be honest, it's here. It's not going away. It's like you take the genie out of the bottle, it's not going away. It's almost like when the internet first came around and people were kind of concerned about that. Now it's just an everyday thing. And AI will likely become one of those everyday things. But right now, with our profession and everything that's going on within society, it's important that we navigate this carefully. Knowledge of the code, the CCRC are responsible for reading, understanding, and following the code and seeking clarification of any standard that is not understood. So again, that lack of knowledge or misunderstanding of an ethical responsibility if we're not actually engaging in what we need to know, if we're not taking those CEs, if we're not collaborating with colleagues, if we're not understanding that, it's not going to necessarily be a defense against an unethical charge. So it's really important to understand the applicable codes, uh, and work within your organization, and understand what is required for your certification and licensure bodies in order to move forward and avoid these discrepancies, uh, that are out there that we see. CRCC and ACA both stress lifelong learning. Again, ethical competence protects the profession from ensuring counselors adapt to new challenges, remain culturally responsive, and advocate for equitable access to services. And so counselors serve as the ambassador of the profession's credibility. And we are these gatekeepers, we are these ambassadors, we are the people that are out there that we need to hold the line. And sometimes you're holding the line in protection of your client. And with everything again going on, we don't, within society today, we don't know which direction sometimes to go. And it's good to consult because right now, and I'm just going to sidebar right now, society and humanity is failing itself right now, currently. And there's been a lack of empathy and understanding. And counselors, you are so key in facilitating this process and navigating this territory that may seem at times scary, but you are key to resolving issues for your client or aiding your client in resolving issues or navigating around the code and recognizing what you're required to do and understand as you facilitate maybe a process in assisting a client. It is really, really important that we understand, do our CEs, acquire those, maintain a level of reasonable awareness of what's happening in the profession, and maintain our competencies in our skills and procedures as we navigate this. So it's really important. So I'm going to talk about the counseling compact. I'm not going to go through all these slides because I have a tremendous amount of slides. So I'm going to jump through some of these. But this, everything that I've just said thus far, you're going to need to know that when you're navigating the compact. And if you're living in a compact state, that's going to be important to understand what you can and can't do. So, pathways to licensure. Uh, credential Credentialing is the purview of the state. Every state created its own licensure law or even their certification requirements or things like that. Some differences in the requirements and scope of practice vary, but across most states, scope of practice is very, very similar. Um, so there are different portabilities of getting licensure or getting privileges. You can do it through compacts, reciprocity, universal licensure, or other agreements. The compact itself, what does it do? And give you an opportunity to think about it and ask questions. So it is a legislative process that allows counselors to practice across state lines. It is operated on a mutual recognition model. And what that actually means is state A says to state B, I recognize that you license your counselors at the highest level. So we will accept that even though our process in state A is different than state B, we will accept that and we will participate in the compact jointly. So you will be able to come into state A and state B says you can come into state B. So it establishes the requirements and the duties for states to participate in the compact, and it delineates the structure for oversight. It allows counselors to obtain a privilege to practice in another state. It provides the ability for counselors to practice in any compact state using telehealth. That telehealth technology piece we just talked about is very, very important for the compact. So understanding what you need to do as you navigate that is going to be important. And I'm trying to keep up with the time to make sure we move through. It provides an expedited mechanism for obtaining a new license when the home state changes or the counselor moves, if the new state is part of the compact. So with the current compact, the way it stands, it's going to make it easier for counselors that participate in the compact to get licenses in all the states that participate in the compact. And what that essentially means is you won't have to go through the normal process. What the commission is doing now is using I believe they're establishing maybe a 1 to 3 page document you'd have to complete that one state would recognize for the other state to get a full license if you choose to do that. But the privilege operates in a way where you can still follow your client if they're in a compact state, or you can work with states that need more counselors out there, and you can work in those states as well that are part of the compact. It also allows for military spouses to practice in any compact state using their designated home state license for the duration of active duty or active reserve duty. Because prior to this, we were seeing counselors that were part of the military or the military spouses. They had these huge Excel spreadsheets where they'd have to go state by state and start over from scratch to get a license. So the compact removes that barrier and makes it much easier to get to practice across state lines. So these are some of the things that are required for participation within the compact. The ability to practice independently, an unencumbered license, meaning you're not seeking your license through getting your hours. You're not an associate counselor in that way. Having an SSN or MPI number or a home state license and pass FBI background checks. So it requires 60 hours and an exam, the ability to assess, diagnose, and treat behavioral health conditions, require post-degree supervision. There's a mechanism for investigating complaints and FBI background checks. So what that means essentially is any new students graduating would have to meet this requirement. But if you are in a compact state, you will be grandfathered in if you don't have like the 60 hours. Let's say you got 42 hours or 36 hours, or you got your degree in psychology, but you met all the state's requirement with the counseling classes, but it was only maybe 42 hours, but you've been practicing for 10 years, you would be grandfathered in. And that's where, we have legacy license. A counselor was licensed as an LPC before the state required the 60 hours, the things that I was talking about. So these are the compact member states right now. And so we are working with other states to make sure that we can get as many states in as possible. Now have 39 states that have passed compact legislation that will eventually participate in the compact. We have two states that are actively operating within the compact right now, and none of this has to do with the counseling profession in the way that you may think. It has more so to do with the states getting their data right so they can go ahead and get online and be live and fully participate in the compact. So it is running live as of now, but not all states that have passed compact legislation are participating in it. And I will say, as a caveat, Pennsylvania, they passed compact legislation, and I'm 95% sure they will likely be a part of the compact by December. And there's so many elements engaged in that, but I don't want to go into that right now because of time. We have a compact commission. ACA has a separate memorandum of agreement with the compact commission. We have spent up to $2 million right now to fund the compact. Whether you are part of ACA or not, we want the profession of counseling, the counselors, to have the full maximum benefit of this. It is beyond one organization. It's that important. So currently we are in year three. We are funding the commission and the compact until they are self-sustainable, until they can sustain themselves. The full commission must meet at least once a year. They do meet. Their subcommittees meet each month, and you are welcome to attend. There is a website with information, and that's on the slide, so I won't go through all of that. But these are some of the committees. More committees will be developed, and there are four ex officio members, and that includes ACA, AMCA, NBCC, and ASCB. The commission is a quasi-governmental agency and must abide by open meetings laws, so they can't do anything that is closed. There are some exceptions, I won't go into that, but dates, agendas, and minutes of meetings are posted on the website at counselingcompact.org, and the public may attend anytime, and this is the executive director and his email. Let's talk about privileges a little bit more. We are currently underway. The database, I gave you a little bit about that. The commission will charge an administrative fee for each privilege request. I don't know what the fee is. I do know they discussed it being something nominal, like $30, something like that. So it's not something that's overarching, like when you're paying your license from state to state. But there will be a process, though, for you, an easier process for that licensure if you choose to go to another state. States will be able to charge the applicant for a privilege amount to be established by each state, and the commission will review and approve applications, and state will issue actual privileges. and the applicant will have to take a jurisprudence exam if it's required in that state. Um, I'm going to jump through a few of these because I want to show you the compact map. These are the states in dark blue that have enacted the compact. Legislation has been filed in all of these states, and like I said, now Pennsylvania has passed it. They were trying to get over the hurdle of FBI background checks, but not just with the profession of counseling, with occupational therapy. They had a number of things they had to do, and it involved a change in their constitution. So it looks like it's going to happen, as I mentioned earlier, but they will make the 40th state if they can do so by December. Um, the database, I won't bore you with that, but I do want to go into related issues just really quickly and just say privileges are voluntary. So counselors are not required to follow their clients around the country. Ethically, the counselor can terminate and refer if appropriate, and they document. So it's important to understand that and look at that aspect of it. Uh, Again, from an ethical and legal issue, you must abide by the scope of practice and according to the laws and regulations in the state where the client is located. That's important. All sanctions are reported. So let's say you do something to violate uh, a state requirement. You live in state A, but you violate something in state B. But what you violated in state B is not an issue in state A because state A doesn't require that particular thing. What will happen is they will report that in the database. Now, can state B take action against your license? No, they cannot. Compact states can only suspend a privilege. Only your home state can take action against your license. And so that's important to understand when it comes to the compact. So you want to make sure you are understanding what is required in the different states that you have a privilege to practice in. But the database allows for a tracking of information and protecting the public. So that's the key for that. So states will be able to go in there and see issues or concerns, but they cannot do anything towards your license. Only the home state can do that. Telehealth will be the mechanism by which the compact operates. The compact permits for telehealth. So if your state says no telehealth, but you're in a compact state, the compact law supersedes the previous state law. So counselors must still abide by and allow requirements regarding telehealth, dealing with HIPAA compliant platforms, confidentiality of session and records, and telehealth is a mechanism by which this will be used to facilitate this process. And I apologize, but something has happened to my slide. So I want to go over real quickly before I go into questions. Some of the top things that we will see with the Code of Ethics is guidelines. We're going to be adding guidelines to the Code of Ethics, particularly around artificial intelligence. We don't want to wait 10 years to have to update that. So that's something that's going to be frequently updated as we navigate the code. We are also embedding those certain aspects of AI within the standard so that members or people that are following the code will understand what they need to do. There is a conversation that's been underway for the last, I'd say, since June about how should we handle sexual relationships that have been violated? And should we extend that time beyond the 5 years that ACA has right now? So that conversation is underway. I don't think anyone thinks we should do away with it. I think a couple of people thought that initially, but that conversation is underway in terms of understanding how we're going through the process. Another area, we're looking at confidentiality and how to consolidate that and be more concise within the code. We're looking at different aspects of the code and changing around the order that. But thank you so much for having me. I do hope that some of the information that I spoke about today was helpful, informative, and that as you, like I said, as you go over and reflect, think about things that you can send me about the AI guidelines, especially around disability too. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Have a good day, everybody.